Hey, everybody, we are back and we are going to continue looking at shepherds. We had an introductory discussion last week, and we're going to move forward kind of just looking at some of the different questions or different concepts that come up whenever we're talking about shepherds. And so the first thing we're going to do is kind of iterate some of the stuff that we talked about is that when we look in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1, and really in several other places throughout the New Testament, what you're seeing is not so much qualifications, like a job application, but you're thinking of character traits. And so when you read through the pastoral epistles, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, what you're looking there is character traits. And you're looking at the kind of person that should be a shepherd or a pastor, a bishop, an overseer, an elder. All those different words that are used to describe this same role. And so when we think about what we're looking at when we read through that list, instead of thinking of it as check boxes where you've got to go through and check off each one of the boxes, you're looking for the type of person that is being described. And the reason why that's important is because if you're looking at checkbox mentality, all of a sudden you start counting. You know, how many times did they make me feel bad versus how many times did they make me feel good? And you start kind of maybe putting things in a balance instead of thinking about the overall character of the person. Does this person exhibit overall the character of Christ in such a way that they could be a leader in a local church, so that when somebody comes to visit, an outsider comes to visit, this is a person that you would trust to deal with them. If there's a problem inside the group, maybe two believers aren't able to get together for some reason or another, this is the person that you would trust to reconcile those two believers and to deal with the differences or the conflict that has come up. This would be a person, if you're a parent, this would be a person that you would trust to train your children in the way they should go, to help you train your children in the way they should go. If you are married, this would be somebody that you would trust to help counsel you and guide you in making your marriage exhibit that image that is over in Ephesians chapter 5. If you're single, this is somebody that you would trust to help guide you in your walk with Christ, to help you learn what it means to serve Christ in the way that you're living. If you are looking for somebody to get married to, you're in that part of your life, this is somebody whose wisdom and guidance you would trust to help you make good spiritual decisions as to whether or not somebody that you're interested in is maybe a good choice, or whether this is the right time for you to be thinking about those things, right? So these really deep, intimate, personal questions, or these deep personal needs, these are the people, the kind of person that you would trust to give you guidance in those things. And when you read through the list, that's the kind of person that's being described. Somebody who you would come to if you're having trouble in a marriage. Somebody that you would come to if you can't reconcile between another brother or sister. Somebody to help you train your children. Somebody to be with you when you get the bad news from the doctor. When you get the bad news about a relationship or about some circumstance in life. Right? These are the people who are there to support you, guide you, help you, encourage you, train you, and teach you. Right? So that's kind of the idea of a shepherd in the New Testament. That's the type of person that you're thinking about. So as we continue in that, you look in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1, those are the two primary places where people tend to go when we think about the kind of person that's being described. Those are certainly not the only places to go, and we'll look at other places as we go through our conversation. But in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus, the reason why we bring those up is because there's two lists there, right? A list of different character traits or elements of somebody's personality. And it's important to note that they're not the same, right? Those are not identical lists. And we can pull them up real quick. We'll throw them up on the screen. When we look at these two lists, they're not the same. Now, there's a couple there that are in red. Above reproach shows up a couple times in each one of the passages. It shows up in 1 Timothy 3, talking about the shepherds, and also talking about the deacons. In Titus chapter 1, it shows up twice. And in each one of those lists, the reason why this is red is because not only do you have the exact word showing up multiple times, but you have synonyms. Above reproach would be one. Irreproachable would maybe be another English word. And they mean pretty much the same thing. But this seems to kind of be, and we'll come back to this in just a second, the overall description of the person. When it comes to their character, their walk with Jesus, their faith, they are above reproach. They're irreproachable when it comes to their trust, to the confidence that they instill in others. That you can trust them to deal with things appropriately according to Scripture. to deal with things in confidence. And so that's kind of the idea. Somebody that is above reproach, they're irreproachable. When you think of them, you think this is a person who exhibits what it means to be a Christian. It doesn't mean they're perfect. We'll get to that again in a minute. But it does mean that generally, when you think of them, this is a person where you don't think of something that they're missing. When you think of who they are, you don't think, oh, they'd be a great Christian except for this, right? That's the kind of person that you're thinking of. Some other things that show up, the items in blue have similar qualities, right? They're very similar in the lists. The items in yellow show up word for word the same, and the items in white are different. Now, this is significant because if this is an itemized list where you go through and this is the application to get the job and you have to make all the marks in order to get the job, then Titus and Timothy being in Ephesus and Titus being in Crete, they would appoint different people because they have different lists. If it is merely and simply a checkbox idea. And the reason why is because, well, Titus would have to appoint somebody who was a lover of good, while Timothy wouldn't. Titus doesn't have to worry if they're quarrelsome or not, but Timothy does. You don't have to be respectable in Crete, and you can be arrogant in Ephesus. And so what you're seeing there is either these two lists are describing the same kind of person, or they're describing different candidates. So you would have one person who would be qualified to be a shepherd in Ephesus, but not Crete, and the same, somebody could be an elder in Crete, but not an overseer in Ephesus. Now, I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that these are separate lists to the point where you would have somebody qualified in one place and not another. So I don't think you're really dealing with qualifications so much as you are dealing with two lists that describe a kind of person. And so what we're going to do, our idea with our time together, is that we're going to go through these lists and kind of look at some of the different character attributes and the kind of person that is being described as we consider who we might want to be shepherds at the church at Brentwood. And so again, this is our list. We're going to keep coming back to this when we deal with 1 Timothy 3 and Titus. And notice they're not the same. So we're dealing with a kind of person and not itemized checkbox lists that have to be filled out completely in a very particular way. And that's significant also because people don't look the same, right? Two people can both be respectable, but be respectable in different ways. Two people can be sober-minded, but they can be sober-minded in very different ways. Some people are very straightforward. They're very forthright in the way that they deal with others, and you may like that, or maybe you don't like it, but you can't say they're not being respectable if they aren't polite when they're doing that. Other people tend to be more emotional in their language, and they tend to be more emotional in the way they interact with people. It feels maybe like, I don't want to say less of a business exchange, but you kind of get the idea what you're talking about. Some people are very, they're just very business-like in the way that they deal with people. You may know somebody like that who loves you immensely, but the way that they interact with you is just straightforward. Other people tend to be very gushy and very emotive in their language, and they love you to the moon and back, whereas somebody else may just say, I love you a lot, right? And so there's a wide variety in each one of these different character qualities. And so we're not looking for a cookie-cutter form, a single type of person. We're looking for these character traits exhibited in a wide variety of ways in different people. Okay, so let's kind of get back to where we were. Now that we kind of know that we're dealing with different lists, but the same kind of person, what we're going to focus on is the idea, again, of a highlighted character. So when we're going through and we're studying these and looking at these different things, we're always going to bring whatever we're looking at back to the person's character. Having faithful children, how does that reflect upon the man's character? Being respectable, his character, right? So we're always going to bring these back to the character of the individual that's being discussed. And again, we're going to come back to this idea that in all of these things, they have to be somebody who today is above reproach. Today is above reproach. Now, why do we say that? Because you're going to be dealing with flawed individuals who make mistakes from time to time. And even if they make a mistake, and even if they have made a mistake recently, it's the kind of person that when you think of them, you're like, well, that was really out of their character. If somebody were to come and tell me that this person had been, that they weren't respectable last week, it would seem odd. I wouldn't believe it at first, right? Which is why you have to have multiple witnesses to accept a charge against an elder, because you just shouldn't believe it. That's one of the ideas, is that they're above reproach. Not only that they have this impeccably perfect character, right? That's not what we're dealing with, because nobody could be a shepherd then, but somebody who, in whatever situation you're dealing with, you just expect that they're going to do the right thing. You expect that they will keep things in confidence. You expect that if they do make a mistake, they will admit it and they will correct it immediately, right? Just the kind of character that you see exhibited by the people in the New Testament following Jesus. The Apostle Paul, he's not perfect. The Apostle Peter, he's not perfect, but Peter is an elder, right? The person who denied Jesus 3 times is a shepherd in the New Testament. And so we're certainly not dealing with perfect people throughout every day of their life, but I guarantee you, if you take the aged Peter and you ask him to deny Jesus, he wouldn't, right? He learned. He has become above reproach. And so that's kind of the person we're dealing with. And again, this all focuses on the character of the individual that we're dealing with. We're going to constantly come back to their character. Okay, so let's look at above reproach. Let's really quick go and look at our text over in 1 Timothy 3. And so what we've got here is, this saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble work. Your translation might have that first verse a variety of ways. But what you've got here, the thing that we need to notice in this first verse, is that it is a noble task. It's a noble work. It's something that is worth doing. And it's worth doing well, because this is kind of the life, right? This is a good thing. This is the center of the life of a local church. Now, a church is focused on Christ, right? Christ is the lifeblood of the church. But when I say the center of the life of a local church, what I mean is that these are the people who are charged with teaching, right? These are the people who are charged, the shepherds, with overseeing, with making sure that everybody is headed in a good direction, that people are being fed spiritually. They're not the only ones with these responsibilities, right? Christians all have these responsibilities to one another, but this noble work is to make sure that these things happen. There has to be somebody who at the end of the day is going to kind of call everyone back and say, we've wandered off the mark a little bit. Let's come back to who we ought to be and where we ought to be going. And this noble work is going to be focused, as we'll see, on the text of Scripture, as we can look at some other places coming up. But because this is a noble task, a good work, therefore, right, this is the reason why. We're going to talk about who this person must be, and the reason why is because it's a good work. If it is a noble task, then we want those who are noble to be fulfilling the task. And so you're going to get kind of a description here of what it means for somebody to be a good believer, to be somebody who is noble-minded, right? That's the idea, this person who is above reproach. Therefore, they must be above reproach. And so the first thing we're going to think about is this idea of being above reproach within the church. Right, there's somebody who, as a believer, you know that they have in the past. Maybe they have been a peacemaker in the past. Maybe there's somebody who has taught others, right? Believers, somebody who maybe is a brand new believer. They've walked them through the early part of being a Christian, maybe explaining some of the more complicated doctrines to them, being patient with them as they fail and come back and fall and falter, and all the things that happen to new believers, right? They're patiently dealing with them like a father training a child. And they have acted that way in a manner that is irreproachable. Again, not perfect, but when there's somebody who needs to be taught, they're there. When there's somebody who needs to be, kind of gently brought back into the way, they're there. When there's somebody who needs to be corrected, sometimes very forthrightly, they're the person who is there. They're the person who is constantly trying to help everybody get better, constantly helping everybody to love more, to draw closer together. It's just whatever needs to be done, these are the people you can trust to do it. So within the church, they have a good standing. If somebody were to ask you, hey, make a list of the 10 most beneficial people, right? They would be on your list. Forget about the number 10. Just make a list of the most beneficial people. Don't want to get caught up in numbers. Just make a list of beneficial people. These would be on your list, right? It's the kind of person that you would think of. Wow, our local church, our church family is better because this person is here. That's who we're looking for. So they have a good standing within the church. Then you're going to turn around and they're going to have the same kind of standing in the community. There have been many people that I have known who, when they come with a local body of believers, they have a pretty good reputation amongst the people there. People like them. They're generally kind. They make nice comments in class, or that maybe they even teach class. But then if you go ask people they work with, the people they work with don't like them. They're a different person at work than they are when they come into the church. Well, that doesn't mean that they have to stop, their teaching activity in the church, or they have to somehow now be excluded or demoted, right? That doesn't mean that. But what it does mean is that they can't fill this role as a shepherd because they are not well thought of outside the church. And one of the goals of a local church is to be spreading the gospel, to be reaching out to the community. And if people in the community think that this person is not a good person, maybe it's a misunderstanding, right? Maybe everything is a misunderstanding, but you can't help that. Maybe it is a situation where they have done something that is very public. And yeah, they're sorry, and they're working to make things better, but it's not quite there yet, right? There might be a wide variety of things, ways that somebody does not have an irreproachable character in the community. Now, in many places in the United States, unfortunately, we've kind of lost the sense of community, where if you were to go through a neighborhood and ask people, hey, do you know this person? A lot of times they won't, right? Unless they work with them, or they happen to maybe be involved in maybe some like sporting event or sporting group or some kind of other extracurricular activity. A lot of times we don't know each other. We don't really have the sense of community like we used to 50, 100 years ago. It's just a different type of culture that we live in. And so what you have to do is kind of gauge what is their standing outside of the church, the people they work with, the people they interact with. Are they a coach, a little league coach? Well, do they coach in a way that a Christian should? Are they always clothed with Christ? Is maybe a way that we could ask that question. And so is their reputation irreproachable within the community? Again, not perfect. And there might be situations where somebody has a bad reputation, but maybe it is for being a Christian, right? Maybe they were somebody who took a stand on some principle, and because of that, there are people in the community who don't like them. You have to remember that once you leave a local church, the hope is that the local church is this beacon of light shining in the darkness. Well, then when you go out to the darkness and ask people, hey, what do you think about this person? Well, you should expect some people not to like them, because the dark doesn't like the light, right? There's no fellowship between the light and the dark, between Christ and Belial, right? There's the fellowship doesn't exist there. So I'm not saying that everybody in the universe has to like them, but generally, how are they thought of in the community? See, even in the first, second, and third centuries, when Christianity is kind of a minority movement, the people who hate the Christians still respect them. There's an emperor by the name of Julian who, talking about the Christians, laments the fact that they're so good at taking care of everybody. They love everybody regardless of their belief, and they're kind to everybody. And he's like, why can't we be more like that? Now, he hates them. Make no mistake. He does not like the Christians, but he respects them. And so that's kind of the idea. What are we dealing with? Again, it comes back to the character of the individual we're talking about. And in everything, like we've mentioned, we should be striving to be like Christ, showing love to those inside and outside the family of faith, showing kindness, teaching, sometimes saying things that need to be said, but always in the most appropriate way for the situation. And so, yes, there's going to be some judgment that comes into this. Is this person above reproach? Are they irreproachable? Well, maybe we disagree with a tack that they took. Maybe we feel like there's a way that they could have done this better, but did they do what needed to be done? Right? There's always room for improvement. The question is, are they willing to do what needs to be done? Whether it's showing kindness, whether it's showing reproof, correction, teaching, what needs to be done, are they willing to do it? That's what Jesus did. When there was something that needed to be said, when there was something that needed to be done, Jesus did it. So are we striving to be like Christ? Now, again, not perfect. And if you look through the character traits in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1, in Ephesians 4, in all the places where we kind of see these different roles mentioned, never once is the word perfect mentioned. In 1 Peter 5, there's no mention of being perfect. In 1 Thessalonians 5, the leaders who are among you, no mention of perfection. The reason why is because nobody's perfect. If you're perfect, you don't really need to be a Christian. You can make it to heaven by yourself, right? You can stand before the Lord without having to worry about needing somebody to intercede for you, about a mediator. You don't need anybody to redeem you. And so by the very nature that somebody is a Christian means that you're dealing with somebody who is imperfect, who has come to Christ to be redeemed. Now, this person should be improving. Right? We don't want somebody who is on the level of a brand new believer, but they've been a believer for 40 years. Right? We want somebody who has been improving every year. They're becoming wiser. They're becoming more mature in their faith in Christ. We want somebody that has 40 years of experience, not 41st years of experience, right? That's kind of the idea. You want somebody who knows what they're doing, and so that they're improving throughout time. They're not perfect, they're getting better. And when we come and we start thinking about the kind of person that we're going to choose, we want to choose somebody who is constantly improving. They're getting better all the time. They also need to be patient or penitent and willing to learn. When you think about these leadership roles, it's a mistake to go through and say, well, we're going to pick somebody who's never going to ever make a mistake, and kind of put that burden upon them and then make them feel like, well, we chose you to be a shepherd because we don't think you're ever going to make a mistake. What a terrible burden to put on somebody's shoulders. Now, if they do make a mistake, they can't admit it. Because the moment they admit that they've done something wrong or they didn't do something the best way possible, now they can no longer be a shepherd. I don't want somebody who pretends to be perfect. I don't want somebody leading me who feels like they always have to have the right answer immediately all the time. There's no leader who does that. And what we need to do is realize that when we're thinking about shepherds, when we're thinking about overseers, bishops, elders, we're thinking about human beings who sometimes don't know what to do, who sometimes forget, who sometimes make mistakes. But what I would hope for in any kind of leader is that when they do something wrong, maybe they say something they shouldn't, or they make a mistake in applying some text of the scripture, what I would hope is that they would say, hey, you know what? That wasn't right. I'm glad that that's come to our attention. Now we can fix it. And now that we know, we're going to try never to make that mistake again. Try never to make that mistake again. We're going to move forward from here in the best way we know how. And we're going to fail again tomorrow, but we're going to fail forward. We're always going to be drawing closer to Christ. When we make a mistake, it's going to be an intelligent mistake. We want to do the things in the best way we can today. And tomorrow, if we learn a better way, we'll fix it. That's the kind of leader that every organization hopes for. And certainly, that's the kind of leader that we would want amongst God's people. Somebody who doesn't pretend to be perfect, admits their faults, and corrects them. That's what all Christians should be doing. And so in exhibiting this irreproachable character, it doesn't mean they're never wrong. It means that when they're wrong, they're still irreproachable. They admit it, and they fix it. Right? That is part of a character that is above reproach, and that is so important and so significant. And the leaders that I have respected most in my life have been those leaders who, when they make a mistake, they don't cover it up, they don't make excuses. And it may not be in the heat of the moment, right? But when they have time to calm down, to think through things, to contemplate and to reflect, the people that I have the most respect for are the people who have told me in the past, we didn't handle that well. This is what we did wrong. And this is how we know it was wrong. And this is what we did to correct that mistake at the time. And this is what we are doing to try and never make that mistake again. Those are the leaders that we want shepherding God's people. Those are the leaders that I personally need helping me to walk with Christ, helping me to be better at serving our God. And so that's kind of where we're going to leave this idea of being above reproach. It is the overall statement of the person's character. And so as we go through these different things and ask what does it mean to be a shepherd, we're going to keep coming back to this concept of the character of the individual and this character being above reproach. God bless you, and we're going to continue with some more next time.